Hi, I'm
We
Eric
are
Healy.
recording,
Oh, sorry.
so let me get the title page up. Okay, this is the University of Mount Olive at Mount Olive, North Carolina. And you out there in cyberspace are about to see a presentation from some members of our MBA program who are going to discuss a strategic assessment of Ford. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Healy, who will introduce his teammates, and the presentation can begin. Eric?
Hi, sure. I am Eric Healy. Alongside me, I have Mason Medlin and Anaya Keane, and we'll be doing a presentation on Ford Motor Company.
Have you introduced your teammates yet?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yep,
sir.
you did.
Okay. Well, begin.
Okay. So if you'd like to go to the first slide here, sir.
Sure.
Perfect. So Henry Ford, when it comes to being a people's person, Ford was a genius, having a sense of empathy and appreciation of others' values. So Ford understood common struggles and needs. At the same time, he understood human motivation and loyalty. He was the founder of Ford Motor Company and was born in Springswell Township, Michigan in 1863 to Mary and William Ford. He was the eldest of 6 children in a family of 4 boys and 2 girls. His father was a native of County Cork, Ireland, who came to America in 1847 and settled on a farm in Wayne County. Henry Ford's career as a builder of automobiles dated from the winter of 1893, when his interest in internal combustion engines led him to construct a small 1-cylinder gasoline model. The first Ford engine spurted its way to life on a wooden table in the kitchen table from Ford home in Detroit. A later version of that engine powered his first automobile, which was essentially a frame fitted with 4 bicycle wheels. This was first Ford car, the quadricycle. It was completed in 1896. Henry Ford was the first automobile he ever designed or drove on June 1896 in a coal shed behind his home on Bagley Avenue in Detroit. The quadricycle featured a light metal frame fitted with 4 bicycle wheels and a buggy bench seat. So in 1913, Ford introduced the integrated moving assembly line auto production. Henry Ford installed the first moving assembly line for the mass production of an entire automobile. His innovation reduced the time it took to build a car from more than 12 hours to 2 hours and 30 minutes. In 1914, Ford introduced the famous $5 a day. Henry Ford and Vice President James Couzens stunned the world when they relieved that Ford Motor Company would double its workers' wages to $5 a day. The announcement generated glowing newspaper headlines and editorials around the world. So in 1922, Ford acquires the Lincoln Motor Company for $8 million. The acquisition came at a time when Ford was founded in 1903, was losing market share to its competitors, as you know, General Motors, which offered a range of automobiles while Ford continued to focus on its Model T. 1925, Ford began the production of the Ford Tri-Motor airplane. So the Tri-Motor was a nickname, the Tin Goose, is an American 3-engine transport aircraft. The production started in 1925 by the companies of Henry Ford and ended in June 7, 1933. A total of 199 Ford Tri-Motors were made. Next slide, sir.
Yeah, before we go further, I've noticed that we've got 3 more slides with history. And I think we want to try to move through these more promptly. This one slide took us over 5 minutes.
Okay, sir.
If we were to extend that by the number of slides, we'll be here till sometime this afternoon.
Okay, no problem, sir. I'll shorten it.
Let's try to move through these just a little more promptly with a little less explanation.
Okay, sure, yeah, no problem. So Ford unveils the medium price Mercury brand. So the Fords and the luxurious Lincoln cars. The first Mercury was the 1939 Mercury, which had a V8 engine. So in 1941, Ford signed their first contract with the UAWCIO, the United Automobiles Workers of America and Congress of Industrial Organization. 1942, Ford halts civilian auto production in the United States to produce military equipment. So in 1954, Ford introduced the Thunderbird. The Thunderbird entered the production for the 1955 model year as a sporty two-seat convertible. So in 1956, Ford becomes a publicly traded company. In 1964, the Ford Mustang was introduced, and it is still a broad car purchase on the market today. So in 1986, Ford introduced the modular assembly line at St. Louis. So the modular assembly line made use of automated and Collier assembly lines to produce vehicle sub-assembles to sub-assembles. Were then added to the main assembly line. In 2006, Alan Mulally became president and CEO of Ford. And next slide, sir, please. In 2014, Mark Fields is the newly appointed president and CEO. And in 2017, Jim Hackett becomes Ford's CEO. In 2018, Ford acquired Corktown campus. Ford's vision for the future of transportation. The Corktown campus is a place where Ford and its partners will work on automobiles and electric vehicle businesses. Next slide, sir. So as you can see here is the Ford credit plan. So Ford Flexible, its first buying is a standard purchase for flexible terms and the ability to customize your own vehicle as you wish to fit personal needs. A FlexiBuy, this program, you can take advantage of special payment plan that involves lower monthly payments for the first few years. So the leasing as well is a red carpet lease. If you prefer to get a lease, this is the way to go before the option, and it guarantees drivers a 7 mileage limits which they can choose from. So the pros of the Ford credit would be the range of financing options, including commercial leasing. Okay, next slide. So notable cars is the Ford Fiesta. It's obviously sold in multiple countries with moderate modifications to fit the customer's needs. It was the UK's best-selling car in 2018. The Mustang, of course, is the Ford Mustang, was once again the world's best-selling sports coupe in 2019, marking the 5th consecutive year the original car and grabbed that title.
All right, so on this slide, basically it kind of goes over some of the products that, or the cars that Ford has manufactured, and Ford has shifted some of its focus to pushing for more hybrid, more electric cars in Europe. And, you know, we see a lot now that like electric cars and hybrid cars are like probably going to be the future of it. Well, they are the future of the automotive industry. And so like this slide basically just shows, you know, like the Ford Focus Electric, the Fusion Energy, Fusion Hybrid, C-Max Energy, and the C-Max Hybrid. Those are just the various products that Ford is pushing in Europe and really pushing to sell. You can go to the next slide.
This slide shows Ford's SUVs and crossover lines, which are some of Ford's best-selling products. And its 3 most popular SUVs are the Ford Escape, the Ford Explorer, and the Ford Edge. Next slide.
And so like right here, this is the Ford offers a variety of pickup trucks. You know, trucks is one of Ford's probably most like sold vehicle. And this picture right here shows all, like, probably not all of them, but a majority of all the trucks that Ford has manufactured and sold. You can see like in the top left, there's like an old yellow, I'm assuming F-150 model. And then in the bottom right, you see a Ford Raptor. That's like the very like new, most up-to-date truck that Ford offers. So you see it on the left, you got the Ford F-150 all the way down to Super Duty trucks. And those are all those series that Ford offers.
These are just some of the car companies under Ford. So Lincoln is the luxury brand of Ford, and then Trawler is a brand based out of Brazil. Next slide.
So here's the mission and vision statement. You'll find this on the Ford's website. This is just basic information that Ford has established for their company. You know, they've stated that they want to make people's lives better. They want to make mobility accessible, make mobility affordable, you know, and they also, a part of their vision is to become the world's most trusted company designing smart vehicles for a smart world, you know. Yeah, that's basically it. Abel's model.
So as you can see here, so Abel's model, it can be used to tune a business's future strategic policies to change the market if needed. So the customer base Ford has a very diverse customer base that is unique to each make and model of their vehicles. So the customer unmet needs is obviously one of the main current unmet needs in the development process for Ford. This unmet need is for people with mobility issues. So the distinctive competencies required to meet needs is research development. 2019, Ford Motor Company spent $7.4 billion on research and development. Each research development plan has different goals. So the Michigan plant has a primary focus on altered fuel economy, regulations, and declining demand and sedans and smaller cars in the United States by developing new designs and products.
So right here we have various manufacturing and production facilities around the world. You know, they have manufacturing facilities in Thailand, Vietnam, Mexico. And what's so important about these is that having these manufacturing facilities allows Ford to be more efficient in how they distribute their products and how they, I guess, push forth their vehicles into international markets. And so if you go to the next slide, we'll also have, you know, they have manufacturing facilities in Canada, China, and Mexico. These are just facilities all over the world, which helps Ford gain an competitive advantage in their international markets. And here we have, obviously, dealerships. There's one in India, China, and the one in North Carolina, that was a dealership that I worked at. But what is appealing to me is how different they look. You know, this one in North Carolina, that's in the United States, but in India and in China, those look so much more appealing than the one that I worked at. And I think that has a lot to do with Ford being an American-made company. You know, Ford's market is saturated, which will in the U.S., we'll talk about that later on. But I think that they make these dealerships look so appealing in international markets because, you know, it's not necessarily it's an American company and they want to appeal to these the people from other countries.
I suspect that the dealerships in countries like India and China are a lot more spread out. And so when you get to one in China, for instance, it's probably a little bit more like going to a classy department store or something. It's a bigger outfit and it's more recognizable, something maybe that stands out more than an auto dealership in the United States where they're everywhere, you know. In China, I can tell you that there are a lot of auto dealerships, but they're not nearly as abundant and close together as they are in the U.S. Rather interesting, the picture of the one in China has cars on a second floor, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Oh, yeah. So here we have international revenue around the country from 2018 to 2019. That was the most recent years I could find. And if you look at this chart, you see that in North America, like their revenue is significantly greater than other areas of the world. And you see that in from 2018 to 2019 in North America, Ford's revenue increased. But if you look at the other areas of the world like Europe, Asia Pacific, South America, from 2018 to 2019, revenue decreased. And so this tells me that Ford is heavily dependent on the sales in the U.S. market more so than in the international markets, where essentially their focus needs to be in the international markets and increasing the revenue there. So here we have GDP, PPP. This is the GDP, and when you look at this and you're Ford, you see that China is obviously the economic market of the world today, and India is the growth market of the future. And, you know, we've learned about that all semester. And, you know, when you're Ford, you look at this type of economic atmosphere and, you know, if you're Ford, you want to be in China, you want to be a competitor in China because of their economy. Then if you're India, just because their GDP is projected to be super strong in the future, that doesn't necessarily mean they want to really push to be in that market right now. You know, there's a lot of question about it and about when to really implement themselves in that market and really try and separate themselves. But, you know, if you're Ford, you definitely want to have some sort of feel as to what they're gonna do, as how they're going to separate themselves within the Indian market. And then if you look at the graph on the second or the first graph, you see that Japan actually has a stronger GDP than the other countries such as Brazil, Canada, and UK and Mexico. But, you know, even though they have a strong economy, we'll learn about it later, you know, that's Toyota's home turf technically. But essentially if you're Ford, you want to be in a country that has a strong GDP. You can go to the next slide. And this is GDP per capita, which is basically the spending power of within each country. If you're Ford, you don't want to enter into a market where consumer spending is not high. You know, so you see in the United States how significantly higher our GDP per capita is compared to China and India. And you know, if you see the other chart, you see that, you know, Canada has high GDP per capita, and as well as I think that's Japan and United Kingdom. You know, those are very similar. So if you're Ford, you may want to consider entering those markets based on consumer spending.
Or consumer spending power.
Consumer
As it
spending
turns
power.
out, you're right, these graphs represent consumer spending, but technically it's the GDP divided by the population, which is a barometer of consumption potential. It's not actual consumer spending, but if you've got the gross domestic product divided by the population and you get a high number, chances are consumption's going to be pretty strong as well.
All right, here's the unemployment rates for various countries. If you're Ford, you don't want to enter into a market that has a high unemployment rate, because if you have a high unemployment rate, they're not going to be able to spend money on cars. You know, that's just kind of common sense. But you see that United States, it was kind of interesting. In like 2010, they were at a peak, and they just unemployment dramatically dropped all the way down to 2020. So that's very interesting. You see China's unemployment is actually very steady. It's like a straight line almost, which that's very interesting as well to me. You can go to the next slide. Exchange rates is very important, because if you're Ford and you're trying to convert currency back into US dollars from an international market, they have to determine whether they're going to be at a gain for profit. You know, they don't want to be at a loss when converting currency. And, you know, and it's very, you know, so like if you're in, I think that's, Mexico, you know, I'm assuming the US dollar is stronger than a Mexican peso, you know, so how does Ford determine when to convert currency back into US dollars when they're making sales in Mexico?
Yeah, that's a good point, and we can see that in these two charts. There's some variety in the Mexican peso to the dollar, but in recent years, if you held the peso for a short enough time, you could pick up a little or perhaps lose a little in terms of what the exchange value was when you generated the profit, which is essentially means when you sold the car. On the other hand, in China, in recent years, the dollar bought more and more Chinese yuan, which means the yuan was not over time worth as many dollars. So if we were to pick up on what Mason's talking about, something's going on in somebody's background. Please mute your microphone if it's you. But if you, in the case of China, your best move is probably to convert those yuan into dollars pretty quickly, because if you wait long enough, those yuan won't be worth as many dollars as they were 10 days ago. So in Mexico, we can take our time a little more. In China, on this chart anyway, the best move is to convert. However, as you can see, there were some times when if you converted right away, you might have missed an opportunity to wait a little bit, and then your yuan would have been worth more dollars, because in a time like this or this, and certainly this one, the dollar wasn't worth as many yuan at the dollar lost value. But generally speaking, the smart move was to convert, because it wouldn't be long before the yuan lost value. It's sorry to belabor that point, but for those of you who are going to get into management, particularly international management, and more international markets matter, convertibility of currencies is getting to be a pretty big deal.
All right, and here we have Japan and India, and you can see as well that, you know, our currency is probably stronger than theirs. So basically, like exactly what we talked about when converting to US dollars, it'll determine how fast they want to convert the Japanese yen or the Indian rupee to a US dollar when they make sales. And if you go to the next slide, UK, the euro is worth a little more than the US dollar. And so I guess
remember, this is the reverse now. This is
right, it's reversed. Yeah.
The backwards.
Right.
This case, it's how many dollars the euro will buy. So
correct. We'll buy
this is actually the same chart as the ones we've looked at. It's just upside down.
Correct. So basically, the US dollar to one British pound is around like 130, I believe. You can go to the next slide.
So this is the US disposable income, and that's just extra money people have to spend on things that they want. And so based on the graph, we can see that disposable income has risen steadily over the past 20 years, now reaching 15 billion. And when disposable income is high, people are more willing to buy expensive items like cars than when their money is low. People start to save it, which brings me to the next slide.
Well, just before we go to that one, Anaya, what's your outlook for disposable income for the next year?
What do you mean? Like,
well, what do you think? Is this trend going to continue?
Oh,
the way we calculate disposable income is we take people's salaries and we subtract the taxes, and that gets us disposable personal income. If we wanted discretionary spending, of course, we'd then subtract the items that are not discretionary, like food and fuel. But what we're looking at here is salaries less income taxes. How does this look for the next year? What do you think?
I think it's going to raise or keep going up.
You think it's going to be what?
I think it's going to keep going up.
You do? What about your teammates? What do they think?
Well, I think it probably will decrease because of the coronavirus and people don't have as much.
Yeah, with the coronavirus,
plenty of jobs have been lost.
Here we've got the most recent unemployment rate report was monstrous, something like 26 million people unemployed, right?
That's right.
So those people, most of them were potential car buyers until they got laid off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now they're not potential car buyers anymore, are they?
That's right.
Oh, okay.
And then this is the personal savings rate in the US, which fluctuates a lot. But the savings rate increases dramatically after 2010 until around 2013, and then it goes back down, and then it increases again, and it maintains about 8% from 2015 to 2020. And then I actually Googled the national savings rate, and it was 8.82% for 61 years. So it's still like doing around the same right now, but probably after the coronavirus, it'll go up.
Right.
And the
Just
same
the way
rate,
it did here when we had the financial crisis, right?
yes.
2007, yeah.
Okay.
And this is just the gross national savings for various countries. And we can see that China has the highest, and they actually decreased. China, India, and Brazil decreased. So China went from 50% to 40%. India went from 35% to 30%, and Brazil went from 20 to 15%. And the U.S. increased. The U.S. and the U.K. increased. The U.S. went from 15% to a little bit under 20, and then the UK's fluctuated slightly, but it still remained at around 13%. So as I said, when the saving rate is high, people aren't spending money on new things like
Whoa,
cars.
whoa, whoa, whoa. Now, what does this indicate? What is the importance of this indicator? Can any of your teammates help? We've talked about this more than once. How do we calculate the gross national saving rate? Can anybody help me with that? Okay, this is the corporate profits plus personal savings. We've talked about this several times. I'm surprised that you guys were unable to answer. So we've got corporate profits, which are the same thing as savings, right? Your personal savings are the result of your getting income less what you spend, and what's left over is saving. And in corporate profits, and for corporations, they have revenues, what you would call income, and they have expenses. And what's left over after they pay their taxes is corporate profits. And once they have those profits, they're unrestricted. They're sort of like free cash flow, just like savings are. And those savings aren't under the mattress, they're in a bank account. So the result of those corporate profits in the bank account and personal savings in the bank account result in availability of funds. They're unrestricted, and they just sit there in the bank waiting for somebody to spend them. And what we see in these lines is for China, and next one down for India, is that their proportions of gross national saving, that is the sum of corporate profits and personal savings, is higher than other nations. And so no surprise that we see China's economy growing the way it has. And in class, I've told you many times about how when I went to China, I saw many roads being built, lots and lots of new roads, as well as new public buildings everywhere. And as the economy grows, the infrastructure grows, especially when the highways grow, what happens? There's capacity to operate and sell cars. And so that explains in a great deal why China's economy has been growing so much faster than other nations. And the real surprise here is India. because India is the second highest, right? And we noticed that India's economy, although it's a lot smaller than China's and the United States, has started a sharp upturn. And now we see why. Because there is availability of currency and funds with which to accomplish that growth. And I'm surprised you weren't able to tell us about that. We sure have talked about it a lot. Who's next?
This is the industrial economic indicators, and we're going to talk about the interest rates next. So according to the graphs, you can see the interest rates in the US and China both fluctuate significantly, but in recent years, the interest rate started to come back down after 2018 and the United States, which stimulates the economy. And then in China, the interest rates flatlined after 2016. And next slide, please.
Yeah, let's bear in mind, these are the discount rates, which are very short-term rates.
Yeah. And in Europe and India, we can also see that there's a fluctuation, but the countries have experienced a dramatic decline after 2014. And so to conclude that when interest rates are low, it increases demand and then borrowing becomes cheaper. And that makes buying cars more attractive for the consumers. And these are the gas prices for 2015 to 2020. And crude oil, if you guys don't know, it's just like the raw oil that comes straight from the ground. And then it's turned into other things like gas and petroleum. And in this chart, it goes up to February 2020, and the US average was $2.50. But I also got the average currently, which is $1.74. So we can see that gas went down due to the coronavirus.
Due to what?
The coronavirus, gas is cheaper now.
Any other reasons?
And crude oil is cheaper.
Why?
Because people aren't getting gas right now as often as before.
Okay. There's been an argument going on in the world between Saudi Arabia and Russia. And those are two very large producers of petroleum. So is the United States, but the United States production is very expensive when we're talking about fracking and drilling shallow wells on land out in Texas and up in Montana and so forth. But at this point, if you watch the news, you should know that there's so much oil that has been produced because of a dispute
between Russia and Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia slashed the crude oil prices and increased their production.
Yeah, and the reason for that was that Russia would not cooperate with OPEC, and it broke the rules. And so Saudi Arabia got pissed off and decided that Saudi Arabia, of course, doesn't like the American frackers anyway. So the Americans' cost per barrel is somewhere between $30 and $50 a barrel. It costs Saudi about $2.50 per barrel to produce a barrel of oil. And it costs in Russia, depending on where you're looking, maybe $20 per barrel. So today, what's the price of a barrel of oil, Anaya? Do you know that?
Like currently, it's $1.74.
Oh, that's gasoline. What about oil?
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's down around $7 a barrel, and the oil that is produced is more than storage capacity, and so a very profitable industry in the world today is shipping, because all the tanker fleets are full of oil, They're just sitting out in the ocean full of oil. The problem is we're running out of tankers. And so as oil gets produced in abundance, the price of oil actually becomes negative. And oil producers are paying storage companies to store the oil. And so when you take that storage price and subtract it from the delivered price per barrel of oil, the net price of oil has gone negative in recent years. Right now, it's slightly positive again, but we are awash in oil, and that's what's making prices of gasoline go down. And as you mentioned, that certainly makes it easier for us to drive our cars. It won't last forever, of course. When the economy gets better, we would expect consumption of oil to go up, but that won't happen right away. And we've got such large amounts of inventory now that it'll be quite a while before we see gasoline prices go back up to where they were, which is good for Ford.
So this is the economic conclusion. And basically, after reviewing all the slides, you can conclude that Ford has a saturated U.S. market and that needs to be, then therefore they need to shift their focus to their international revenue and how they can increase that. Recently, they pulled out of Brazil, and so basically that kind of insinuates that they're cutting production costs. India may not be an attractive market right now, but in the future, it definitely could be a major contributor to their success. You can also look at how, GM was in India, but they pulled out. You can assume that it was probably because they entered that market too early and they didn't have, or their strategy within entering that market was probably not sufficient. Cars in places like the UK will probably be more expensive due to the exchange rates and when they have to convert to US dollars. Gas prices were moderately high, which may affect truck sales in the U.S., I would assume. Revenues in Asia Pacific and South America must increase in order to continue manufacturing. And low interest rates in China and Europe may attract more car buyers. Go to the next.
Yeah, gas prices were moderately high, right?
Right, correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so B, we have the markets, and the first slide here in the markets is a consumer. So as you can see here, older Americans buy new cars. So more so than 25 and younger would be the likes of the class, and 65 and older would be the likes of our grandparents, etc. The difference is that in 2007 and 2017 saw a rise in 2% in 25 and younger, whilst in 65 and older, we almost see a double increase in buying new cars from 2007 to 2017. Now, what likes of automobiles would more so tune in to 24 and younger, which is kind of hard with the demographics and population of the different countries at the moment, based on how they're going to advertise and appeal to across the board, because there's such a mix of different various target markets that they can choose from. So
I don't know if you guys picked up on this. I assume you did, but it's kind of interesting, isn't it? You've got this going on, don't you?
Mm-hmm. So you have a 35 to 44, obviously in 2007, buying 29% of new cars. So these are new cars, so more like some people that are younger now in 2017 would be looking to, let's say, save a little bit of money, because obviously a new car depreciates 20% once it's driven off the lot. So if you're better off in buying a used car, why not buy a used car and save a little money for saving, such as a house.
Yeah.
Or saving for a mortgage.
Interesting chart.
Mm-hmm. So the next one here is the in-market shopper. So customers that would be nearing to the point of making their vehicle purchases. As you can see here, the month of the March took a huge downfall from 2 million to 1.6 million in a year due to maybe more so the coronavirus in March. So this isn't a yearly, this is a year kind of from March to March 20th. So basically in the last year, you can see that there's a little bit of a drop, and this could be due to the coronavirus also, because obviously people aren't spending as much money now. So in 35 or in slide 36, the population. So the USA is equal to about 328.2 million. One thing to point out is India and how much the population is rising. And this could be an indicator to why India in the near future could also take over China, not only in population, obviously in an economic standpoint. So even though China has a 1.3 billion, India will overtake China. But in 2018, their population in India was 1.35 or 353 billion. But as you can see from the graph, they have taken over China and the United States. And this is probably more likely an indicator as well to the rise in their economic standpoint, not only their population.
Yeah, it's a long-term indicator, of course, just because of the GDP per capita, which we'll see in a minute. But obviously, the folks in India aren't as wealthy as they are in China. So China's auto market is very active, as you guys know. And you also know that India's market is active, but in a much different way, and the consumption of cars is a lot lower. I think you've given us something else rather interesting, and that is the relationship between Japan and Mexico. Did you discuss that, Eric?
No, I didn't, sir, actually. So Japan and Mexico, you can see that there's a complete opposite kind of change between Japan. So Japan's kind of taken a little bit of a pitfall, while Mexico is still rising in the numbers. So
yeah,
as you could see, we could probably project that Japan will keep kind of going down, while Mexico will keep kind of rising. So almost cross over like an X. So the population will be risen.
Yeah, it's rare that we see an industrialized nation like Japan actually declining. You've got to sort of look closely, but it's pretty clear that if Japan's economy was valued or had something like 100 and, you guess with me, but maybe 130 million people. Today, maybe it's 125 million, right? But it's not as many as it used to be. And we'll probably see some more about this, but Japan is clearly going through some changes demographically.
Yes,
and among other things, that interests those of us who study this stuff, because we wonder whether the same kind of thing can happen in a nation such as the United States.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So here we have a slide here is the net migration for the USA. So people leaving the United States has dropped from 702,000 in 2018 to 595,000. So this can be an indicator, and it can also affect the GDP. It can also affect the national savings, and it's a graph that I thought would find interesting and to include in this presentation.
Okay.
So, the next slide here is the consumer buying intentions. So as you can see here in the USA, the UK, Germany, and China, and the top two will be a touchscreen for entertainment, navigation, and vehicle information. So, and the second one will be Bluetooth for hands-free calling. Those are the top two main products that they'd like to include in vehicles. So as you can see, China across the board want to be satisfied in every kind of regard, near enough to the same. And while you can see all four would be the top two, and the USA obviously would be top two. So Germany, more so or less like China, but this could be also related to personal preferences and having things to satisfy their needs.
Yeah, I frankly am less interested myself in the differences between countries than the mere fact that the kind of technology that is required to make a car attractive, and it's clearly electronics.
Yes, sir. So customer preference, as you can see here, is mainly black and white. So in the coupes, you have 24.62%, and sedans is black with 21.39%. So the convertibles is also black. Sports cars are black. So the trucks would mainly relate to a white car, or minivans and vans would be white. So the wagons would also be white. So the customer preference in terms of color across the board would be either black or white. So the motor vehicles and part dealers in a 5-year period, the sales of auto parts and dealers rose from 86 million to 106 million in January in 2018 or 2020. Sorry. So you can see a steadily increase in the motor vehicles and parts dealers, like spread over across a 5-year period. So this would be an indicator also that a lot more vehicle parts would be sold.
Yeah, and what's your projection for car part sales in the near future?
I might take a pivot, because as you can see, it's a steadily rise and increase. Not only is it going up and down also, but I believe so it'll take a little bit of a pivot in the motor vehicle and part dealers, because it's suddenly rising and can't rise forever.
If it's true that the coronavirus and general economic situation around the world is going to depress auto sales,
Yes,
then for the same reason, we may see a surge in auto part sales as folks have to maintain their cars, right?
mm-hmm.
What do you think, Mason? You're the guy that used to work in the car dealership.
To be honest, I don't know.
When they come in for parts, the dealer tries to sell them a new car instead of repairing their old one.
Sometimes.
Right, that's what you would do. You sit there, with your, I'm gonna go grab that.
Well, I was a service advisor, so I was a service advisor. I wasn't a salesman.
Oh, okay.
But like people come in and they would have issues wrong with their car, and I would work with them to get that issue resolved, and I would work with like technicians.
I see.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Ford's big on.
So here we are with the light trucks.
Yeah, so the lightweight trucks, so 16.5 to 11.5 in just a month, which is a huge drop, as before the graph indicated a steady enough correlation. Well, not dropping below 16 million.
What
units,
accounts for that?
Which accounts for the lightweight trucks and why there's not that many sales at the moment.
Yeah, we seem to have a decline going on here. I assume this line at the very right is simply because your Excel chart has a 0 in it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, that's my apologies. So you had the chart there off red.
This line doesn't really exist, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I took the screenshot off red. My apologies when I had it.
So
it goes down to 0.
What we've got appears to be sort of a decline.
Yes, sir.
Right? And the question that we have then is why the decline?
Maybe more so people would like to.
Has not been successful, or is it because the desirability of light trucks is declining?
Isn't wanted anymore. So preference to customers the consumers are more so appeal to the coupes or sedans, and maybe you see a slight increase in that regard as opposed to lightweighted trucks.
Yeah, the industry statistics seem to indicate that sedan sales have declined and the truck sales have held up. Now this indicates that lightweight trucks have declined. So I'm not sure exactly what to get out of this, but lightweight trucks, where the Ford F-Series, for instance, falls, have declined. I kind of wonder whether there's a new category in there now with I see larger and larger consumer trucks. I wonder whether they're all in this category or whether there's a new category.
Okay, so you can see here electric vehicles in the global market, and China has a substantial amount. So as you can see, you have a 3.8, and in Europe, it's near enough to like slashed in half of China's electrical vehicle global market. So in Europe and the United States, you can see maybe more so an increase in it, but it's dropping below China's, and China's demand for the electric vehicles global markets absolutely, it's outrageous. Carry on. So, and then you can see across the board down there, as you see, like with Norway, Japan, United Kingdom, France, Germany, the Netherlands, they're more so like not so inclined to have the vehicles in the global markets in the electric.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether you have the data in this presentation. As it turns out, Norway has a very large electric vehicle per capita ratio. I don't recall exactly what it is, but it's pretty large. The portion of Norway's population that drives electric cars, but it's a far larger proportion than in other countries. And it's just a result of government programs.
Okay. So now I moved on to the health and safety concerns with the vehicle safety measures. So Ford's top priority is always safety and the well-being of their employees, dealers, customers, suppliers, and other stakeholders. And the adaptive cruise control, so on the blind spot information system with cross traffic alert. So the blind spot information would more so in, like, let's say likes of Europe's roads, because it's constantly they're smaller roads, as less straight streets, and they'll have roundabouts and cross and interwinding cars. So such as the Ford Fiesta, if they had the blind spot information systems, it would help a lot in health and safety concerns, considering the size and the narrows and intertwining roads that we have over in Europe. And then the forward collision warning with brake support, so the lane keeping system and the personal safety system. And I also included down here as a safety concern for COVID-19. So the quality is defined by our customers and goes hand in hand with safety. Our customers are why we exist. Their satisfaction is essential to our success. Therefore, the quality of our products and services must be our number one.
So here we have the steel prices, and we'll learn a little bit later on in the slide that Ford is like big on cutting production costs, and if you're Ford and steel prices are high, that's going to make production more expensive. And so basically, like percentage change in steel price is very, very essential in production if you're Ford, because obviously the cars are made of steel.
These are the total vehicle sales, and based on the graph, the sales were highest in 2002 and 2006, with the highest being 20 million. And then after that, the recession hit, which caused vehicles to decline drastically, as we can see right there. And then around 2011, sales started to pick back up over the years. And now in 2020, sales are, well, now that you mentioned it about Eric's graph, I'm pretty sure that line at the end of the graph is not actually there. So, but
you don't think so?
Well, maybe, but like I said, due to the coronavirus, but
yeah,
I'm not exactly sure because you said that.
Well,
Eric, I do have that in my notes.
Eric's line went all the way to the bottom to 0.
Oh, okay.
And
well, yeah.
This one doesn't seem to do that, and it seems to fall at about the same level that these did. So we may have a way to go, but we do know that a whole lot of automobile plants have been closed, right?
Yes.
You listen to the news, right? You see the news, yeah? Okay, so you should have heard about all these auto plants being closed and auto workers being out of work. You've heard about that, right? Yeah?
Not really.
No?
To be honest, I don't really watch the news.
Oh, you don't watch the news?
No.
No. Okay.
This is the Ford's U.S. market share. And as you can see, Ford has declined about 5% from 2003 to 2019. And I said that this can be due to Ford not appealing to its consumer wants or rising gas prices. And then there's also just a lot of competition in general in the US, and it makes it hard to maintain high market shares. But they're currently around 14.08%, and then they're working on ways to increase it, which I'm going to talk about later on in the strategies. And then this is the estimates for the US market share in 2019. We can see that General Motors is first with around 17%, and then Ford is ranked second with 14.1%. And then, as I mentioned, I did mention that the slide before, and then Toyota is third with 14% also, but they're right behind Ford. And then it goes all the way down, and then Tesla has just about 1.1% of the US market. And this is the global market share. We see that Toyota has the largest percent globally with 10.24%. GM has 8.5%, and Volkswagen has 7.59%. And then Ford has 6%. And then three companies, Nissan, Hyundai, and Honda, are right behind Ford, all around 5%. But just an important note that this market share only makes up 57% of the market, and then the remaining 43% is other car companies that aren't as popular or that we don't know, such as Wuling, which is in China, and Suzuki, and then Mitsubishi.
Okay. It's kind of interesting, you know. We've got Toyota at 10%. Honda, let's see if we can find them at 5%. So these Japanese, before we add in Kia, are over 15% of the market. Volkswagen, another, call it 8. But it's pretty easy to see here before Nissan and so forth with another 5. A large portion of this market is made up by manufacturers that are not headquartered in the United States, right?
So these are just the market conclusions. And as Eric mentioned earlier, older consumers are the ones buying majority of the cars right now. And so we need to keep an eye on markets with growing population trends, such as India. And we're going to hope that the economy grows with it. And then Ford's market shares have decreased from 19.19 to 14.08, as I mentioned before. And then the two main influencers in consumer buying intentions are Bluetooth, enhanced touchscreen entertainment, navigation, and vehicle information. And then the Ford's global market share is 5.59%, and they're in third place behind Toyota and Volkswagen.
This is more like a summary than conclusions. You know, you haven't really given us a lot of conclusions here, but you have sort of summarized the main points. Do you have any particular conclusions? You know, I mean, there's one pretty obvious one. Can anybody just sort of hit that one real quick? This is the one that's sitting here looking at your face.
Ford needs to increase their market shares?
Yeah, because it's lost market share, right?
Yes.
Ford's position in the world has weakened. And so Ford needs to figure out how to strengthen its global market positions, both at home and in other countries. But for sure, that's the number one takeaway. This is not as strong a company as it used to be.
All right, so here we're about to talk about the Ford's competitors, and in this slide, there's just kind of pictures of mainly international competitors. You know, Toyota, Tata, there's Honda, Subaru, Ferrari. But if you go to the next slide, we'll see that Toyota, the leading car manufacturer in the world, they're honestly blowing every car company out of the water. In this graph, it's actually represented in Japanese yen. The recorded record of 30 trillion Japanese yen, which is actually equivalent to around 270 billion US dollars. So you see, like, if you're Ford, that's who you have to strive to be. That's who you're competing with. You know, so if you're Ford, they have to ask themselves, what is Toyota doing that we're not?
Yeah. Well
you
said.
go, yeah. And so go to the next slide. This is GM, and you know GM owns Chevy, GMC, Cadillac. You know, they have an advantage because they can appeal to consumers on a variety of ways. They can give them Chevy trucks, GMC trucks, or cars, or you know, Escalade. That's how
Don't
GM.
forget that GM has also introduced uniquely Chinese cars, Chinese models in China, right?
Correct.
Yeah, not just their conventional cars that we're used to.
Yeah.
But,
Yep.
and they've done something else too. What has GM done very well? They chose a very strong partner in China, right? SAIC. That has problems because SAIC is obviously not General Motors, but SAIC is the strongest auto company in China, and it's GM's partner. What's the problem with SAIC? It's also Volkswagen's partner.
Okay.
Right? So SAIC not only produces General Motors cars for General Motors, it produces Volkswagen cars for Volkswagen, which is a weird situation.
Right. And if you see on the chart, GM is actually doing more.
Sorry.
You're good. If you see on the chart, like you can actually see that in China, GM is actually performing a little bit better than in the United States, which is actually really significant.
Okay.
You can go to the next slide now.
These are the global car and light commercial vehicle sales by region in 2018. And we can see China is the highest with around 28 million. And then Europe is second with 22 million. And North America has roughly about 20 million. South America has 4 million. And Asia has 17 million. But if we add all of Asia, China, Japan, South Korea, Asia Pacific, they get about 45 million of global car sales, and they're actually the biggest consumers in the auto industry. So that's important for Ford to market there because they're the ones buying a lot of the cars.
Right.
And this is the vehicle sold for Ford. So their best sellers are their trucks with 1.2 million. Specifically, the Ford F-150 is their best seller in all of the company. And then SUVs are second with around 830,000. And then the cars have a huge decline, and they're only selling about 349,000. So based off this, Ford has decided to discontinue majority of its sedans, and then they're just going to focus on improving the SUV and truck product lines in the future. And this is the BCG matrix. So as I said, the trucks are the stars and the cash cows are SUVs. Their ventures are the electric cars that they're coming out with, and then they already have some hybrid cars on the line, and then on the product line. And then sedans are, I didn't want to put them fully underdog, so I kind of put them in the middle. They're going to see how that goes, how their profits will be when they remove sedans. And then, yes, so next slide. And
Okay.
I'm getting into the
I
product.
moved the sedans for you.
Okay.
They're cash cows, but because they're declining, they're sort of on that borderline between cash cows and dogs, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And this is the BCG matrix for the current products. So the stars are the Ford F-150, which has sold 896,000 vehicles, sorry. And then the Mustang, which is always a bestseller for Ford, but it only sold 72,000 vehicles, which is way less than the F-150. And the cash cows, for this, I have the Ford Escape, which sold 241,000. And then the Ford Fusion is actually pretty popular, but it's going to be discontinued as well. But they're going to focus on the Fusion in other markets. And then the question mark is the electric cars. That's the Mustang, which is called I think it's the Mach-E, and that's coming out in 2021. And then for the dogs, I have this white car right here. Well, they're both white. But the Ford C-Max only sold 38 vehicles, so that's being discontinued, along with the Taurus, the Fiesta, and the Fusion, as I said. And then the Ford Focus, that's also a dog, and it was actually on the list for one of Ford's most unreliable vehicles in 2017. And I personally have one, and I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
You don't like your car?
No, I hate it.
This was the high point of your presentation. You really know what you're talking about here. I don't know whether you can, but it would be helpful if we could just sort of jot down the name of each one of these models. Boy, you really know them too. Anyway, I thought you were very impressive on this slide.
Thank you. So Porter's 5 forces we use to determine if an industry is profitable, and also for businesses to come up with the strategy to counter forces that drive profitability down. And so for bargaining power of buyers, we put that it's high because there's low switching costs, and customers will try to bargain for lower prices or go to other competitors where they can get good quality for a good price. And then the threat of substitutes is medium, but that also just depends on the location, because in New York, the substitutes might be higher because there's subway and walking, but in just regular cities, most people need a car. But I put the substitutes are walking, biking, ride sharing, and the subway. And then
what about in India?
Oh, there's a lot of, I'm getting into that later. There's a lot of substitutes there too.
Yeah, anything in particular?
The two-wheelers.
Yeah, and the three-wheelers.
Three-wheelers.
Sure.
And then rivalry among competitors is high. They compete with price, quality, durability, and features. And then some of Ford top competitors, as Mason mentioned, were GM, Honda, Volkswagen, Toyota, and Fiat Chrysler. The threat of new entrants is pretty low because it's difficult to enter into an established industry, and there's large amounts of capital needed. And then people also have a lot of customer loyalty, and there's already established corporations. And then, okay, I didn't say bargaining power suppliers, but it's low.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
They're not very important anyway. They don't. That's not much of a downward pressure, is it?
Yeah. And this is just the country comparison. So as we can see, profit potential varies depending on the country. And then high rankings will drive profitability down. So we have US, India, China, and Europe. And my conclusion was that profitability would be highest in China just because they have a lot of people there and the economy is doing pretty well. But I said profitability would be lowest in India just because there's a lot of government regulations and corruption, and then it requires a lot of research and development to market really good products out there. Plus there's a lot of substitutes, like you said, the two-wheelers, the three-wheelers, walking. There's just a lot of different options. So just to be able to succeed in India is kind of difficult, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible. But I would just recommend probably investing into China based off this.
Good analysis.
This is the 5 forces summary. As I said before, rivalry is high, firepower is high, threat of new entrants and supplier power is low, and then threat of substitutes is medium.
Depending on where in the world you are.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so all in all, is the profit potential of this industry very high?
Yes.
It is?
No, it can't. It's sometimes.
Okay. And here, you've got a little wrinkle in the method because we don't get the importance in this analysis. The analysis doesn't we can have a weighting, which would make it a little more reliable. But the rivalry in this industry is so intense, and partly due to the capital requirements, which are so substantial, and the risk which comes with that capital requirement, coupled with buying power. And the buyers, of course, are the dealers as well as the dealers' customers. That the scale isn't really equal like it is in this exhibit, but rivalry is way out here somewhere, right? And buyer power is almost as high. So these other threats aren't high, but what's really significant is just how strong rivalry is. And as I mentioned, the capital requirements. So the result is that we have quite strong forces that push profit down in this industry. This graph, because of the equal intervals in the scale, really doesn't tell us how strong these downward forces are.
My conclusion was profitability in India is very uncertain, but it is a growing market.
Yep.
Intense rivalry forces competitors to use a hybrid strategy, low cost and differentiation. And then US and Europe have already very established markets. And then the profit potential in the automotive industry can be high depending on the country.
Yeah. Can be higher in some countries than others.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that the profit potential can. If we look at the financial, I think you've got an exhibit somewhere that shows us the financials of the rivals. Some do better than others, but Toyota mainly. But this is a tough industry to make a buck.
All right, so here we have Porter's Diamond. When you make a Porter's Diamond, essentially is a measure of a country's ability to support a company such as Ford based on their current economic conditions. So basically, can the economy support Ford? And so what I essentially did was I created a table with various countries. And obviously we know that the United States, their economy can support Ford. U.S. has a saturated market. And I mainly, like, to summarize this whole table, I concluded that China's economy can support Ford the best just because they have the highest GDP. And then I think the U.S. has the second most potential to support Ford just based on the fact that they're already here and the amount of GDP per capita and our GDP. And I think that India's economy right now, although it may be different in the future, they are least likely able to support Ford in comparison to these other countries. And here we have the Cage analysis. And I think it's important that when you do a Porter's and do anything like that, we're measuring a company's ability to go into a market, and you analyze how, okay, so what can the economy support it? And then what are the barriers to entry? And that's what Cage analysis does. It measures what are the barriers for us entering this market. And so basically, if you have a higher total, or if it's ranked, if the numbers are higher, that means it's harder to enter into that market. And so I said India right now is harder to enter into the market, or harder to penetrate. That market's harder to penetrate at the moment. I say this, due to their culture. It's overpopulated. They probably don't drive as many cars as we would here. So Ford has to shift their focus on how they're going to market to those people. Geographically, to my understanding, they have bad roads, and currently right now, the economy probably isn't where it needs to be in order to enter into that market. And so that was my conclusion as to why India has the higher barrier to entry.
Mason, I think you've done a very good analysis. And as I've promised you know, when you do the analysis, you get full credit, but, you know, this 2 for culture, I
Okay.
would make a 4.
All right.
Because simply because of the cultural difficulties involved in breaking through the stratified society. You know, what is beautiful in India is not the same as what's beautiful in the United States and so forth. So the Cage analysis measures the difference between the home country and the country that you want to enter into. And so no surprise, you've got a 1 for the US across the board. And in fact, those could even be zeros. But when we go to the UK, of course, you know, that we get along with them. Japan, although it's a different nation, you know, it's very industrialized. You've been generous to China. You know, I might have done a little, made that a 2. But India, it's culturally very. It's not that it's so different, although it is, but it's very complicated. So you make an appeal to one group and you turn off another group. Very difficult. As I've said to you many times, India is an enigma in the auto industry. It's an unsolvable problem. You've got this great growth potential, this great big population of people who ultimately will become consumers. On the other hand, you've got graft, corruption, roads that are not well maintained, great differences between parts of the nation. So you do something right one way and you screw up the other way. You just can't win that game. It's an enigma. It's an unsolvable problem. Not only that, they've got all these, well, enough of that. I was going to talk about their economics.
And then these are the critical success factors, which separate winners from losers.
Mm-hmm.
The critical success factors that we put were advanced engineering, electric engines, innovation in robotics, fuel-efficient cars, global competitors, and media advertising. And the critical failure factors were quality, inefficient manufacturing is what I meant to put, cost controls, and financial security.
I love your graphic. I don't know where you got it, but I think it's ideal for critical success and failure factors. I was wondering if I could have your permission to use it in some of my slides.
Of course.
Thank you.
Okay, so here is competition financials, and I know there's a lot of numbers. So what stands out and what I think is very important when you analyze this chart is look at leverage. You know, if you look at companies like Toyota and Fiat Chrysler, Honda, you see that their leverage is significantly lower than like Ford and GM. And what this means is that like Toyota, they can be more strategically aggressive than Ford in entering into markets because they are able to, like, essentially Toyota has less, I guess, debt per se, because leverage is essentially borrowed money invested. I guess that's how I would describe it.
Well, I'm going to use some language here that Toyota would definitely disapprove of, and probably most of the my academic colleagues would too. But Toyota can afford to screw up more easily than Ford and GM, right? With a leverage ratio down around, and a recent number that I saw was down around 33%. So if Toyota can take risk, okay, it can invest in a project, break into a new market, or simply do something that could really, you know, break through and give them a whole new big shot of market share. But to do that, they've got to take a risk. They got to do something they haven't done before. And with leverage of 33%, it could go wrong. but if it does, maybe their leverage goes up to 40%. That's still way below General Motors and Ford, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
So, you know, it's a luxury to be able to afford to screw something up. and, but Toyota and Honda have that luxury.
Yeah. If you look at Toyota, look, their sales are just blowing everybody out of the water.
For sure. For sure.
And so industry structure conclusion is that Toyota is the leading car manufacturer, and therefore I would consider Ford's biggest competitor because that's who they need to strive to be, and that's who they need to analyze and see what they're doing, what they can do different. And so to conclude, Ford's leverage is weak. They have to fix their leverage ratio. They got to get that percentage down. Fiat Chrysler and Toyota can be more strategically aggressive in various markets like we have talked about. And Ford's higher leverage ratio cripples Ford's ability to become a competition in various markets. China's economy can obviously support Ford the best, according to Porter's Diamond, and China potentially has the economy to support Ford the greatest, I think. And like we talked about, the greatest barriers to entry are in India.
Yeah. Be great if somebody could come up with a strategy to figure out how to overcome those barriers and establish a position for the long term. There are ideas on how to do that, but it's complicated.
Ford has actually partnered with Mahindra in India, and I think that's probably part that can contribute to them trying to become or enter in that market or do better in that market or set themselves apart.
Good point. Good point.
Here we have the financial trends, and you can see that the sales have gradually increased all the way up to 2019. And, you know, because of this coronavirus, I think we'll see obviously a decline in sales.
Sure.
I don't think that'll continue to increase. I think that's actually going to go a lot down. And as that goes down, operating profit percentages will go down as well, even more, because operating percentages are profit when you're taking into account variable costs, if that makes sense. So
well said.
So when you look at return on investment and return on equity, that's going down as well. Return on investment is like it says, you know, they invest money into a market, how much return are they getting? And then return on equity is when it takes into account debt. And so like basically how much all that invested money is worth in return.
Well, if we look at ROI, it's return on invested capital. So if invested capital, at least the fixed portion, doesn't change much and profit goes down, I guess the rate of return on that investment's going to go down because the profit's going to go down, and that's where the return comes from. In the case of return on equity, it's the rate of growth in equity from net income, which is operating profit less interest expense and income taxes. So we've got net income that isn't being penalized by interest and taxes, and you've got equity, which is after debt. And so the only thing that can make equity change is net income. And if operating profit goes down, then odds are that net income will go down, and therefore the growth rate of equity will go down. Yep. So it's pretty much all driven by operating profit, isn't it?
Right.
And you've explained to us that to a large extent that operating profit's driven by sales. And what's kind of interesting here is that sales have gone up, but profit margins, the percent, has gone down. And that raises the question exactly why. Partly it could be because of the exit from some countries. Partly it simply is because in order to compete with strong competition, Ford's had to do things like lower their prices or increase in costliness of developing new features. But there it is for all to see. Sales are up and profits down. Yeah. You know, if I'm working at Dearborn as a manager, I don't like that at all.
Yeah, they're losing money for sure. And then if you look at long-term debt and equity, you obviously see their long-term debt is far greater than their equity, which is not good at all. And then invested capital, you see that they have a large amount of invested money into markets. And, that's probably why we see long-term debt as high as it is compared to their equity. And then we see that their leverage ratio percentage is down at 75%. That's very high.
Yeah. There
So-
was a time when it exceeded 100% when
Yeah.
we had the financial crisis and they didn't declare bankruptcy, but it still is a troubled company financially.
Oh, yeah. And then that conclusions basically summarizes everything I've just said.
Okay.
So I don't want to repeat myself.
This is the CSF report card. On the left, my left side is the critical success factors that I mentioned earlier. And, whoa, we can see that how close the competition is with everyone's average at the bottom. But we can see the best competitors right now are Toyota, Volkswagen, and GM. And then Ford is right behind them, and then Nissan and Honda.
Okay, next we have the functions and skills. So the strengths and weaknesses. So the strengths would be obviously the F-Series trucks in the USA, the Ford Credit, as mentioned earlier on, brand recognition, and also Alan Mullally's introduction to the One Ford program. So the weakness would be the slow innovation process, the higher cost compared to competitors, as Mason was saying, the high leverage as well, and also South America would be one of the weaknesses.
So here we have goals. And I put on the goals hierarchy, I put Ford in a favorable market condition. I don't have them in a long-term growth spot just yet. They're saturated in the U.S. market. They're in these international markets, but they haven't reached their maximum potential in these international markets. China, there's still room to grow and increase sales. I think GM is beating them in China. They need to get more favorable market condition in China. They need to expand and they need to set their focus on these international markets in order to achieve long-term growth.
Yeah. Sometimes I ask teams to separate domestic from international, but in the chart that I didn't bother in this case because we saw in a chart earlier that Ford's domestic market shares are falling. And we've already acknowledged that internationally, it just hasn't gotten into high gear. It's just hasn't come anywhere near to realizing its potential. So we can state that Ford does not yet have a favorable market position. And so that's what it's seeking. That's the level on the goals hierarchy. It needs a more favorable market position. It certainly does not have one yet. Used to, didn't it? Used to be the #1 car company in the industry early on. So boy, its fortunes have changed.
And here we have the goals table. This is their financial goals. You can see that their sales are increasing by 1% all the way to 2024. Supposed to be, but I don't see that happening with the coronavirus and the way the economy is doing right now.
No,
But what really stands out is the long-term debt and equity. You can see from 2019 all the way to 2024, you see a deficit of $12,510. That's a 12% decrease, which I think that's a good goal to decrease their debt by 12% in that many amount of years. That it goes from 101,000 something to 88,000. And as you see that their equity increases in response to that. And I think that is that's an achievable goal, but I don't know how well Ford will achieve it now with the way the economy is doing at the present moment with the coronavirus.
Well, let's hope that some drug company comes up with either a treatment or a vaccine.
Oh yeah.
I think your opinion is sober, and as an investor, you got my attention.
And here we have, this is just basically financial goals in a graph chart. Basically, you see that the sales, they kind of do a nice little, I guess, U, but I don't see them going up like that at all in the near future. I see those sales going down. And then I think it's interesting to say that the operating profit margin, the return on investment, our return on equity, they all look very similar. You see that they all level out from like around 2020 to 2024, which I think is very interesting.
Very similar patterns.
Very similar
Good
pattern.
point. Good point. Yeah. Once you've got sales determined, operating profit sort of falls in line. And when you got operating profit, your rates of return are just there. The one thing that that the analyst at Value Line who made the data, I don't think you changed their data. That's our source. But the analyst seems to think that with a slight uptick in sales, we can get a big kick in profit margins. And we certainly hope that that is correct, because it'll only be with that profit and the free cash flow that flows from it that we'll be able to retire the debt and fix that leverage problem.
Yep. And on this slide, you can see that the long-term debt and shareholders equity, they're not meeting just yet, but I think that eventually that obviously their long-term goal is for those to eventually intersect and trade places. And you kind of see that their goals reflect that, and it's kind of in the process of doing so. And then you see that their invested capital, they, I guess, plan on not investing as much money in the near future, because you see it planes off. And then their leverage, they obviously are planning to try, or they want to decrease their leverage. But even though their leverage their predicted leverage in 2024 is declined, that still doesn't mean that they can be strategically aggressive. It's only going to be at like 65%, I think, in 2024 projected, or their projected goals. That still doesn't mean that they can be strategically aggressive. It means that they still need to keep working and getting that leverage ratio down, as well as increasing their equity and decreasing their long-term debt.
Mason, if you keep making remarks like that, you can be a strategic planner.
I'm all for it.
That is right on target. Yeah. Even when they've achieved their strategic objectives, they're not ready for prime time. Wow. Now there's sort of a secondary ramification of that, and that is, what is Ford's future if in 2025 or 2024, 2/3 of their capital is still borrowed? And one possibility is that they'll have to get married.
And so here we have competitive position. And basically what I did here is I created a chart it's a pretty simple chart. I just kind of basically stated my opinion on their position in these markets that they are in. Obviously the United States, they're strong within our market. China, I said that they're moderate. I believe that they are second in, like, China. Our sales in China are like second compared to the U.S., so they have a moderate position there. Japan, I'm not even sure if I'm not even 100% sure if Ford is actually in Japan, but I understand that it's not a bad market to enter into. But I do know that they would have to compete with Toyota, because that's Toyota's.
Sure. It's also very ingrown. I think you're fine.
Okay. And then India, I said they're in India's market, but I think that their position there is still weak. I don't think it's moderate yet. Some people might say it's moderate, but I think that there's still so much more room to grow that they aren't stable.
They depend on Mahindra.
So it can't be moderate. Right. They're dependent on Mahindra. They're dependent on that economy to continue growing. UK and Germany, I just put as moderate. United Kingdom, their GDP is, their economy's steady. Ford has been in the UK for a while. They've fallen behind, to my understanding.
Yeah.
And the same thing, Germany. I think I saw on one of our charts previously, Germany, the sales in Germany are, I actually had a statistic. They sold around 200, I think it was around 200,000 units in Germany in 2018. That was the most recent statistic I could find. And so that's why I put them as moderate, because of the amount
Yeah.
of units
There
sold
might
in
be,
Germany.
there might be down here in Europe, you know, with Volkswagen and other German makes of cars, as well thought of as they are, you might actually call the German position weak. Ford's always been pretty strong in as a brand name in the UK, but they've really, you know, sort of, I guess the word would be weekend. What they, I imagine that if Ford wanted to, it could rebuild its position in the UK because it still would be recognizable. But if you just look at this as a report card, regrettably, you don't see anything out of the home market that is, quote, strong, which is again a source of concern.
And these are just some of Ford's goals for the future. So they want to accelerate the introduction of connected smart vehicles and services customers want and value, and then increase use of common parts across its full lines of vehicles, reducing order complexity and building fewer prototypes. And then they want to reallocate $7 billion of capital from cars to SUVs and trucks. As I mentioned, like they're discontinuing the sedan, so they're going to put that money towards making better models. And then deliver 13 new electric vehicles in the next 5 years, including a F-150 hybrid, a Mustang hybrid, a fully electric small SUV, and an autonomous vehicle hybrid. And then they also have strategic alliances with Mahindra, as Mason said, in India.
But
And
they already have the alliance, so maybe it's, would that be a more appropriate word?
yeah, I got it off the website, so it said possible, but sure.
Well, they already have an alliance with Mahindra, right? So we can't go get one if we already have one. But we can exploit it, okay? We could say exploit it or strengthen it. Mason, help us out. What do you, they've got the alliance already, right?
Correct.
Okay. What about Zoetis? I don't know that company in China. What's the story on that one?
I don't know who's Zoetis.
It just, maybe that's what they were talking about when they said possible, but the possible one with the one in China, Zoetis.
Yeah, okay. Well, okay, I'll just leave it. Tell me, you say these are goals. Let's see if you got a good grade on your quiz or your test. Please define for me a goal.
Oh, gosh.
Well, if you can't get it now, I'm going to go back and change your grade on your test.
Yeah, but aren't you looking for a very specific definition?
Yeah, I want the definition of a goal.
It's something that a company is trying to reach.
The vision to be reached.
This is it's a standard for success, right? It's a success standard, okay? And these are not goals. These are strategic objectives. These are things that that will help to promote the accomplishment of goals, but and some of them are may not be quite strong enough to be strategic objectives, but and there are certainly other strategic objectives. But for one thing's for sure, and that is that these are not goals. Okay. Um, and so when we had Mason's goals earlier, let's see, these were goals, and he gave us competitive position goals and so forth. But these are the steps anyway that we would take as we move toward the accomplishment of those goals. Okay, strategy.
All right, so here's a SWOT matrix. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and problems. I said that there's many of their strengths is that they're an international company and their brand image. You know, Ford's a very known, well-known, well-established company, and they have a variety of different products, which allows them to have product differentiation. And you know, I have a Ford truck, which is a very dependable car, so I think that it's been a very dependable truck, and so I put that as a strength of theirs, is that they have very dependable cars and service. Weakness, although they are an international company and that's their strength, that is a strength, but I think that their international presence is a weakness. You know, they need more sales in China. They need more sales in Europe. They haven't reached their max potential yet. I think that they have maybe a little slower innovation process. You know, I think, you know, Tesla, they're coming up with autonomous vehicles. You know, I think that Ford needs to be a little more innovative in that process and taking those steps. And I think that they're very dependent on the U.S. market, which makes them weak. And product recalls, I mean, that's just the kind of little basic weakness cars have. I think all cars have product recalls. When I was working at Ford in the service department, we had people coming in, bringing cars in all the time because they had product recalls and cars needing to be fixed, like manufacturer defects. And so I thought that was a good weakness to put in there just based on my experience. Opportunities, I think expansion into new global markets, that's opportunity, you know, maybe expanding and I don't know, I know they just pulled out of Brazil, but maybe figuring out a way to strategically expand into those areas in South America. Electric cars, maybe electric cars that that's changing the way that's going to change the way we drive, like use cars in the future. You know, that's changing the automotive industry. Autonomous cars, that's changing the automotive industry as well. Those are opportunities Ford can enter into. So basically product development as a whole is basically their main opportunities. And problems, market saturation. Actually, I don't know if I consider that a problem. I'm kind of on the fence about market saturation being a problem or a good thing. I guess it has both its pros and cons. Competition and technological advances. I think like companies like Tesla are so much further ahead than Ford, and that's an issue. Ford needs to get on the ball and not. They need to get on the ball and catch up to these companies that are already ahead over them. And a problem is they close various international facilities, like the one in Brazil. Why are they closing them? It's probably due to their their debt and how much the issues that are having financially. I think that those are some big problems.
Okay. I think I may have moved some of these slides around for you. If we're going to have a matrix like this, we want to have it at the beginning of strategy to lay out the situation that we're dealing with. I'm not sure, but I think this may have, when I got your file, it may have been later. But I put it up here at the beginning, and I may have done that with a couple others of your slides. So if that's the case, I hope you'll forgive me, but it's more conventional this way. Okay, next slide.
This is, this one, right?
I think you just skipped a couple.
Did I skip one?
Yeah, go up.
Yeah, if you go up.
Whoa!
It'd be the second one right there, yeah.
Yeah.
Next one. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. So we have the value chain here. So the value chain is identifying competitive advantage. So conducting the value chain analysis of Ford Motor Company during the planning process which possible sources of competitive advantage can be identified. For the firm, company is collected of different activities. So as you can see here, the firm infrastructure is the big three. In the US, it's just-in-time scheduling, shifting manufacturing to lower cost locations. So the HRMs, the leading managers, recruitment and training, cheap labor, cut off staff due to excess capacity. So the technology development, using information technology to improve logistics process, designing, manufacturing, marketing, and sales. And the procurement is working closely with suppliers to eliminate waste, thereby lower the cost for both, which is a win-win situation for the both parties involved. And so next we have the inbound logistics, which the operations, the outbound logistics, the marketing, sales, and services. The location of facilities in Europe, which would be quality, reliable, standardization, distribution of storage and finished goods. So it's obviously to identify complex interrelationships and interdependencies.
This is part of that current situation that I referred to a minute ago. And of course, it's the source of cost reductions if your strategic objective happens to be low cost, which I think we'll get to in just a second.
Yes, sir.
So what we're trying to do is just get the foundation elements out of the way so that we can get to the so whats.
Okay, perfect, no problem.
So here we have the generic strategy, and basically this kind of goes over, I guess, their generic strategy as far as how they appeal to the markets that they're in. They have, low cost, which has to deal with their affordable cars. Ford adopted a low cost strategy aimed at reduction and reducing the cost of production, like we've already learned about. When they are cutting production costs, it allows them to appeal to consumers with affordable prices. And so that basically implements a strategy of low cost. And then in doing so, they have a differentiate. They're able to differentiate various cars and have different cars at low cost prices per se to, I guess, middle class, mainly middle class people. So that's kind of how I view their generic strategy as low cost differentiation strategy.
Yeah, so we call this what?
Hybrid, yep.
Yeah, right. Okay, let's see.
This is the Ansoff's growth matrix. And so for market penetration, we have strategic alliances in Europe and Asia. Ford and Volkswagen are investigating joint projects to strengthen each other's competitive position, including a joint development of a range of commercial vehicles to better serve globally. And then they also have China, which I mentioned that they're having the venture with Zoyoti for a new line of small battery vehicles. And then marketing and advertisements, payment plans, and discounted vehicles, just to make sure that they're still selling the products that they have at an affordable rate. And also with Ford Credit, it helps them get better payment options.
It's not necessary for you to read every bullet. That's not necessary. You don't. We can read the slide. If there are important points here, please tell us about those. But you just don't have to read the whole slide for us.
Okay, for market development, just expanding into other markets, such as India, and working on better products for China. And then product development is the hybrid vehicles and also the electric vehicles that they're coming out with. And then just keeping up with technology.
Right.
And then product proliferation is the autonomous vehicles, which they are actually expanding into. And then I'm going to talk about that later.
Product proliferation, of course, is new products for new markets.
Yes.
So we always wonder just, how far to go in allowing us to use that term. Is an autonomous vehicle a new product for a new market, or is it a product development? And we can argue about that till hell freezes over.
And this is the One Ford point business plan. I'll just get straight to the summary then. It was created by Alan Mulally in 2017, and it was One Ford had the vision, which specified how people would work together towards one team, one goal, one plan. They initially had 27 platforms, and that was just becoming too costly and making things hard for the company. So then they reduced it to 9, and they utilized the scale economy for mass procurement of component parts.
Yeah, if they're making fewer platforms around the world, yeah, and they've got the identical plants, which is something else. They made the plants more similar worldwide. Then, there was a time when one particular Ford model was made on a different platform in different countries so they could respond to local market conditions. But now that the industry has moved toward globalization, Ford got left behind. And it couldn't get economy in purchasing components for its cars when it had 27 platforms. Now that it's got 9, when it purchases components for a particular platform, which is the framework on which different models will fit, it can purchase components for this thing underneath in much greater quantity. And when it can produce components in greater quantity, it can produce them at lower cost. So this thing up here may have a different body style and a different name, but underneath it's the same. The platform is the same. And when the platform is the same, that means that we can buy all the stuff that goes on that platform in greater quantities and reduce the cost of producing. Also, when the plant, the manufacturing facility that produces these platforms is the same in several countries, and somebody finds an opportunity to improve a method in one of those plants. Since many plants are now the same, they can introduce that change across all those other plants and instantly get a big reduction in cost or quality. By the same token, if there's a problem that's discovered in one of those plants and it gets solved or just identified, boom, you can let everybody know that that problem exists. And then the engineers can go to work to fix it, and boom, across all those factories that produce just a fewer number of platforms, that problem gets fixed in all of them. So Mulally's program really revolutionized, changed the way Ford behaved.
So yeah, basically just kind of touching up on the previous slide from the One Ford program. Here we have 4 different cars, and basically the 2 on the left were part of the multinational strategy, basically, which was a multinational strategy, which means that there was like a unique vehicle style to each country. See, they had like the Ford Figo and the Ford Falcon. I think those were in Australia, I believe. I don't, but then we have, with the globalized strategy, we have, like the Fiesta and Taurus. And like we said, Ford implemented that multinational strategy, but, has now more so shifted to a globalized strategy. And you can conclude that the multinational strategy was increasing their production costs whereas they needed production costs to go down.
Sure.
Okay, next we have the vertical integration of Ford. So as you can see, that's the Ford River Rouge, which was built in early 1927, and is now stopped producing. And it is a vertical integration which involves attempts to integrate all facets of an operation into one spot. So that was the main idea that they had behind this. So for example, steel plants generally try to accomplish smelting and refining operations at the same location. So by doing this, they cut transportation costs, and in case of steel production, they also save on the energy costs associated with the two processes. So that what Ford's main idea here was to produce their own products and to make a least cost of transportation, assembling and manufacturing. So therefore, they don't have to get an outside source for their certain products.
Yeah, and this worked for a while.
Mm-hmm. And next we'll have the horizontal integration. So as you can see there from the bullet points there listed on the PowerPoint. So the horizontal integration is a single industry SCM strategy whereby companies seek to achieve competitive advantage and profitable growth through value creation activities that are focused on a single business or industry. So
what does horizontal integration, what does it mean? What's the definition?
The horizontal integration is where a company seeks to seek competitive advantage.
No. Remember the value chain?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Raw material to the consumer, right?
Raw material to the
all
consumer.
the steps. I think we even had a slide with that.
Mm-hmm.
Vertical integration means that we expand within that value chain. For instance, we might buy our own distributors.
Yes,
or,
sir, yeah.
as you explained a minute ago, we might produce our own raw material, as in Rive Rouge, okay? Horizontal integration means that at the level we're at on that value chain, we will expand.
Okay.
And so that means, in that case, we would acquire other companies that do what we do. And of course, Ford did that. It bought a lot of companies that made cars.
Yes, sir. That's what I have presented here in this slide.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have related versus unrelated diversification. Related, we have heavy buses, Ford Credit, and then the acquisitions of Autonomic, Translock, and Quantum Signals, which is transportation software technology, which is going to help them when they expand into their autonomous vehicles, because some of those technology firms actually were used in the military, and it's just supposed to help you like control the vehicle or the product without actually being inside of it, which is just like autonomous vehicles. And then unrelated, we have consumer electronics. Ford had Philco radios, and then heavy machinery, which is tractor trailers and agricultural tractors.
Yeah, for quite a while, they were a big producer of agricultural tractors and radios. I remember when I was a kid, Philco radios.
So here we have the Ford Motor Company's organizational structure. So the importance of an organizational structure is to see if the structure is well enough to implement a strategy. So I just have a chain of the organizational structure here. If you'd like to go to the next slide. So the organizational structure, advantages and disadvantages. So I have put here Ford's case, the organizational structure directly relates to the global automotive industry condition. So the corporate hierarchy in Ford's organizational structure has the advantage of ensuring global direction and control. And then I have Ford's organizational structure has the disadvantage or risk of disregarding the significant unique conditions or needs of national markets. Okay, now the organizational structure to implement strategy. So we have the corporate hierarchy. So traditional in its organizational structure, executive vice presidents report to CEO Jim Hackett, for example. Middle managers report to these executive vice presidents, and this characteristics of Ford's organizational structure supports traditional business management approaches that aim for effective top-down control. The geographic divisions. So Ford has the large geographic divisions in its organizational structure. Apologies. Typically, global companies divide their operations into several regions per continent or subcontinent. However, Ford's organizational structure is divided into only 3 regional geographic divisions that covers all of its markets around the world. A potential effect of this feature of the organizational structure is the relative case of integration of business strategies. Ford's main regional geographic divisions are the Americas, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia Pacific. Well, also Africa is included in this too. So the global functional groups next would be Ford's Motor Company's organizational structure. Also has functional groups, each of which represent a specific business function. A vice president heads each of these specific groups. The main functional group in Ford's organizational structure are as follows. Let's say global manufacturing and label affairs, global marketing, sales and services, human resources, and also finances. Next slide, please.
I moved your bullet here
Yeah.
in because this is, let's see, it looks like you've done it this way. Oops. So, yeah, that's what you did. Whoops, 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 whoops. There we go. Ah! I'm definitely not gonna get a job as a stenographer. There's no question about that. I haven't got a prayer. Is there a name that we give to a company that is organized like this? What can you draw any conclusions about this organization structure?
It'd be a 3D Matrix Global.
Yeah, this is a matrix, isn't it? This is
Yes,
a
sir.
global matrix. Okay, just wanted to get that pinned down.
No problem.
And these are just some of Ford's major projects and programs. So they have Ford Credit, as Eric mentioned earlier, which just allows customers to choose a financing option best for them. Then Ford Smart Mobility, that was founded in 2016, but it's still being worked on, which is specializing in the autonomous vehicles, data analytics, and the customer experience. Then the Ford Pass app, which is a rewards program that lets customers earn free maintenance and other rewards. And then again, this is Ford Mobility, as I've mentioned before. And they want to include that to expand the business plan to include auto, but also mobility as well. And then they want to strive to lead the industry in connectivity, autonomous vehicles, data analytics. I've mentioned all that before. And then they're, what? Were you saying something?
Oh, you want the next slide?
No, I thought you were about to say something.
I just cleared my throat. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. And then the skills required to implement strategy is constant innovation with the electric and hybrid vehicles to attract consumers who are interested in fuel efficiency and stuff like that. And then strengthen competitive position and profitability. And then improve or discontinue non-profitable vehicle lines in each market. And then reduce structural cost and surplus labor. And then gain better knowledge of foreign markets.
So I have a leadership slide here. So the leadership of Ford Motor Company started with Henry Ford, creation and invention of Ford Motor Company in 1903. So I decided to put in a little quote here. So coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, working together is success. And Alan Mulally most definitely elaborated on that fact. So with his creation of the One Ford plan, he was the CEO and was a major impact to Ford's success.
Yeah, I think Henry Ford would have been proud of Alan Mulally because
100%.
they both saw Ford as one animal, one system. You know, Henry Ford wouldn't have used the word one system, but when he introduced the assembly line, when he did Rive Rouge, you know, putting everything together, you know, that vertical integration, he was thinking about the whole system. And so in modern times, here comes Alan Mulally saying, damn, you've broken this system up into all these little pieces and we got to get it back together. We got to have fewer platforms. We got to be more integrated and so forth. So I think that Henry Ford would have just stepped up and shaken Alan Mullally's hand and patted him on the back and said, "Welcome, son. I'm glad you finally got back to my company because we needed you."
Yes, sir. So the leadership today, which is implementing strategy. So Jim Faraday was appointed the president, New Business Technology and Strategy. He oversees strategy Ford's smart mobility, Ford autonomous vehicles, and research and advanced engineering. So Joe Hinrich is appointed president, which is an automotive and will oversee Ford's global operations, including product development, purchasing, and manufacturing, marketing, and sales. And then we have Marcy Clevorn, who's the president of Mobility, has elected to retire from the company in October after 36 years with the company. So she will serve as a chief transformation officer, work closely with Ford president and CEO Jim Hackett and the Ford's leadership team.
Okay.
And this is a slide I just wanted to include with the Ford's offers assistance to customers during COVID-19. So this obviously looking after their customers, which gives them a great brand image and reliable and trustworthy company. So Ford and willing to help people and those in need that are the current, maybe future customers. So Ford focusing on health, peace of mind of customers during development outbreak of coronavirus. So Ford Credit is encouraging customers in the US impacted to contact the company to discuss potential delay of payments to provide relief. So additionally, Ford Credit is offering a program giving customers who buy new vehicles the option to delay their first payment for 90 days. So this is a good little marketing aspect as well, using this time and this pandemic as a way of obviously advertising and maybe obtaining new customers with this offer. So, and also the Ford company is fun. So Ford's philanthropic arm is immediately directing more than $500,000 to non-profit groups in Southeast Michigan and will support delivery and food for senior citizens and thousands of children who do not have access to school meals. So Ford Credit is also launching an ad campaign starting like today as I was doing the presentation. So it's to raise awareness of its assistance program. So it's using this pandemic as also an advertising scheme. So, yeah.
Okay, conclusions. Who's doing conclusions?
I have the strategic objectives. So first, for short term, focus on increasing domestic market share first, and then create better suited products in foreign markets. I know Ford is really going to focus on having better products in Europe, and then focus on a differentiation strategy, and then discontinue sedans and focus on SUVs and trucks, as I mentioned, except for the Mustang. And then long term is to expand the business plan to include auto and mobility, and then increase global market share, introduce new electric vehicles over the next 5 years, and then create better suited products in Europe, as I already said.
Okay, so next we have challenges associated with the value chain. So as you can see from the slide of what I've elaborated on earlier with the value chain, but it's to identify competitive advantage sources. So obviously by conducting the value chain of Ford Motor Company during the planning process, possible sources of competitive advantage can be identified. So identifying complex interrelationships and interdependencies. So Ford Motor Company can identify various internal and external links among activities through the value chain lens. So as you can see from the PowerPoint here, that the challenges faces with the value chain is dividing the operations into primary and support activities may not be separable due to increased complexity. Effective value chain implementation does not only require familiarity, but detailed expertise now. And the next part of this would be improve the flow of materials. So the information and finances. The improved information flow can help the company identify and exploit new opportunities and reduce external threats. The continuous value chain evaluation can result in timely filing important gaps that may affect the firm's productivity, which in this case we have seen throughout Ford.
Okay, I think that was the last slide, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. This was a good presentation, very comprehensive. Definitely got the job done. I think to save the YouTube, I'm going to stop.